Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this week's message. If you want to learn more about Revision Church, check us out at revisiondsm.org. There are a lot of great resources there that you can take advantage of. We hope you enjoy this week's message from Pastor Mike as he finishes off our Identity series.
Well, good morning, Revision. How many of you guys are excited for the Super Bowl today? How many of you are excited for church today? That's the response I was looking for. I'm excited for church. I'm fired up to share with you guys a little bit of what God has put in my heart as we close out this Identity series. Next week, we're kicking off a series called Live Free or Die. You're not going to want to miss that. But this week, we're finishing off this series where we look at who God created us to be and how it is that we as individuals and as a community of people gathered together in this thing we call the local church are going to live out our identity in Christ. And this morning what we're going to do is take a look at one last identity statement, one last picture of who God created us to be and how God created us to live and breathe and move in the world. And this is one I believe can radically reshape the way that we live our lives, the place that we find our hope for the future, and the way that the world, and specifically our community, sees Jesus and his love through us. And here's that core value. It's this: gifted people give to people. Gifted people give to people. God has given every single one of us gifts, and his purpose in doing that, part of what it means for each one of us to live out that identity, is we would use those gifts to generously bless the people around us. Now, a real quick time out, because some of you are looking at me like, I just heard this message a month ago. We already covered this one. And we did. Like a month ago, we talked about the idea that each one of us is uniquely gifted with some abilities and some talents by God so that we could use those abilities to bless the world and serve the people around us. And I want to fire you guys up. This is what happened after that message. I got to the end of that message. We talked about this idea that gifted people give to people, that each one of us has talents that are meant to be used to bless the local church. And since that message, since 1 month ago, since the beginning of this year, we have increased our volunteer pool at Revision Church, like the number of people who are serving, by over 30%. That's unreal. That's unreal. That's exciting stuff. Like, that's the kind of stuff I get to go brag about when I sit with other pastors. Like, the people of Revision are amazing. Like, that just doesn't happen. That's an only God thing, and that's what's happened. So I decided, man, that's so cool. I'm just going to preach that exact same message again, see if we can get another 30% by March. So hold on to your hats. No. We talked a month ago about spiritual gifts, about being uniquely talented and gifted in ways that we can serve people. And this morning, what I want to talk about is being blessed by God, being gifted by God with finances that God invites us to generously give to the people around us to make a difference in their world. I don't know, as soon as I say finances, people get nervous. People get nervous when pastors talk, when churches talk about money. But I believe God's inviting us to be generous. I got a vision to cast for you this morning. I got a picture to paint. So bear with me, even if the idea of finances makes you a little bit nervous. And if you're not a believer in here this morning, if you don't know Christ, you get the best of both worlds. Because at the end of the day, you're not accountable to God for any of this. But maybe you'll hear something that's useful to you, because the creator of the universe paints a picture for us in his word of how he created us to deal with the finances that we have and how he created us to live and move and breathe and give of those finances to the people around us. And I think it's life-changing, world-changing, future-shaping stuff. It's the kind of stuff that will eventually allow us to live out the fullness of our identity as gifted people in this world who are created to give to the people around us. Okay, and I know, as soon as I say words like rich and as soon as I say words like gifted financially, immediately in most of our heads we go to the point like, oh, that's not me. I know that's my default position, right? We hear the word rich and we think, oh, not me. And I was thinking about this message this morning, and I started thinking back, like, when's the last time I felt rich? And it's a long time ago, okay? Like, I thought way back in the day, I decided I was going to be self-employed for a summer. And so I got this job painting people's addresses on their curbs, right? And I got a business license and this little kit, and I made this awesome T-shirt. It said, Mike Howard Curb Painting Incorporated. There's a flattering picture for you right there. I promise, sometimes in college I showered, but more often I look like that. Anyways, on the back it said $5 special. That was my sales gig. I'd tell them, Mike Howard Curb Painting, $5 special. And then people would feel sorry for me and give me $5. And admittedly, like, I was not the most hardworking go-getter in the world. I worked until I had about $40. And some days that was like 2 hours. But for me, at the time, like $40, that was a lot of cash on hand. I'd never had that much cash. And it was all in fives. Right? But I'd never had that much cash on hand. And especially at that point in my life, $40 was a lot of money, and I felt rich because that was way more than enough to cover my bills. Because I had no mortgage, no commitments, no kids, no food costs, no nothing. And so the moral of this story is if you want to feel rich, move back in with your parents. In America, we have this complex relationship with wealth because most of us don't feel rich, but we live in the midst of a culture that sets wealth and sets richness and big bank accounts and this feeling that we're financially secure as the ultimate goal of our lives. And ironically, in that same society, most people are not very good at managing the wealth that they have. And how do we know that? Well, we can take a cursory look before we dig any deeper at the statistics. And this is measurable for as long as time has existed. In the United States of America, charitable giving percentage is inversely proportional to income. For as long as this has been measured, the richer people get in the United States of America, the less they give away. Okay, and maybe in terms of actual money, it's bigger, but in terms of percentage, the more you make, the less you give. And usually, people who make a lot more give a whole lot less. As your pastor, I'm praying all of you get filthy rich. That'd be great. It'd be great for the church. It'd be great for you. I hope God blesses your socks off. But I want you to understand if that happens. I want you to understand why it happens and what God gave you those resources and that wealth for. What the purpose of it is in your life, because wealth has side effects. It has serious ones. We all know that's true because all of us have met a really weird rich person, right? We all know that it's true. And one of the weirdest and first side effects that wealth has is that wealthy people don't like to admit that they're wealthy, which is counterintuitive because almost every other group in our society loves admitting that they are what they are. Smart people cannot wait to tell you how smart they are, okay? Athletic people glory in their athleticism. Introverts love to tell you that the reason they're being rude is because you're just draining them right now. They're introverted, okay? Extroverts can't wait to tell you they're extroverted, like they even need to, right? Like you already know. And alcoholics even admit that they're alcoholics. That's step one of AA, right? But try getting a rich person to admit that they're rich. It's just not going to happen in America. And part of that's denial. Part of that's denial about the resources that we have. People don't want to admit that they're rich because they don't feel rich. And the reason that most of us don't feel rich is that somebody has more than we do. And we can't feel rich until we have at least as much as they do. There have been a bunch of studies where people ask Americans across a wide range of socioeconomic backgrounds what it would take for them to feel rich. And usually what people answer is about twice what they make. So you ask people who make $30,000 a year, how much would you need to make to feel rich? And they say, about $75,000, I'd be rich. And then you ask people who make $75,000, like, no, I'm broke. But if I made $150,000, I'd be rich. You ask people at $150,000, they're like, no, I have zero dispensable income. But if I made $300,000, that'd be it. And this is true all the way up to $2 million a year. Everybody in the United States of America believes that if they only had twice as much as they make, they'd be really rich. In fact, Money Magazine just did an article about what people think is necessary for them to feel financially secure and rich. And the average answer, the median answer, was $5 million in liquid assets. $5 million in liquid assets. But even if you ask people with $5 million, if they're satisfied with the amount of wealth they have, I'm willing to bet that you wouldn't find a lot of satisfaction there. And here's the deal, though. I'm going to lay it out here really clearly. We've heard a lot in the last few years about income inequality, in this presidential campaign about income inequality, Occupy Wall Street, the 1% and the 99%. But here's a fact. If you make $48,000 a year, you're among the top 1% of wage earners on this planet. If you make $48,000 a year, you are the 1% in this world. Sorry for the long silence. I was kind of hoping someone would get excited about that. Like one of you would just jump up and shout, I'm rich! I didn't even know it! I've been rich for a long time! I don't even know it, but no one did. No one did. I'm not surprised by that because most of us don't feel rich. And I think we spend so much time convincing ourselves that we're not rich, like keeping our eyes focused on the materialistic culture in which we live, that we never look up and start living the lives that God created us for. We never look up from materialism. We never look up from this feeling that we're poor and we don't have enough to start living the lives that God invites us into in the world. And here's what happens when we don't live those lives. We get plagued by discontentment. We get plagued by this sense that we don't have peace and we're not content and we don't have enough, and it takes over our lives. And we shouldn't be surprised by that because accumulating stuff is an appetite. And what happens when you feed an appetite? It grows. It grows. And so when we get more stuff, what we do is we feed the appetite for more stuff, and we want more stuff. And the more you get, the more you want. And rich people check this out. I know none of us are rich because none of us jumped up and celebrated, but I'm going to tell you something about rich people in case you ever become rich. Rich people eventually accumulate so much stuff that they do this thing that's called upgrading. And that's where you take something that you had and then you trade it in for a new same thing that does the same thing, but it's newer, okay? This is true. Rich people do this with cars, okay? Now, I know none of you are rich, but let me explain this to you. You're not even going to believe this. What rich people do is they drive their car to an auto lot, and then they leave it there. And they also leave a whole bunch of their money. And then they drive away in a new car that does pretty much the same thing the old car did. But they left their money. Who would do that? Rich people. Rich people, or check this out. I've even heard this happen. This is even crazier. Rich people, check it out. Rich people walk into a kitchen that has countertops and a fridge and a stove and cupboards, and they rip it all out. And they replace it with countertops and a fridge and stove and cupboards. I know why you're laughing, because you're like, no way. No one does. I don't believe that. Rich people do that. It's true. This is the truth. Or I even know like some rich people, they hate standing in line. They hate it so much they do all their shopping on Amazon, except for once a year they go to the mall and they sit in this really, really long line, right? And then they get out their iPhone so that they can take a selfie and text it to their friends to let them know that they're about to get an iPhone. Rich people. Or this is one too. Rich people, I've heard this so many times, maybe you could even finish the line. Maybe you've heard it too. But rich people tend to stand in these rooms that they call closets that are full of clothes, and they look around and say, I have nothing to wear. Crazy old rich people, right? I'm telling you this in case you ever get rich, okay? In case it ever happens for you, I want you to know. In case you ever get to the point where God gifts you with financial resources, I want you to understand what he is inviting you to do with them. Okay? And we're going to take a look at what he has to say about that. If you have your Bibles with you this morning, you can open them up to the book of 1 Timothy. It's toward the end. It's this letter that Paul, the Apostle Paul, wrote to this guy named Timothy, who's a guy he mentored and taught to be a pastor. He sent him out to be a pastor, and he wrote him this letter telling him, like, here's how to pastor the local church. And these are some of Paul's thoughts to Timothy. If you don't have a Bible, the words are on the screen. If you don't own a Bible, grab one in the back when you leave. We'd love to give you one. But this is what Paul writes, 1 Timothy chapter 6, beginning in verse 17. He says, command or instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Okay, so Paul kicks this whole thing off by telling Timothy, instruct God's people who have financial resources. And mind you, just a little bit of context. Back then, these people that Timothy's pastoring, right? If they saw a person, or they saw a family where one person could go to work 5 days a week, and that was enough to provide not only shelter, but food for a whole family for 7 days a week, you would have been mind-blowingly wealthy to these people that Timothy's pastoring, okay? So that's the context. And he says, hey, if there's anybody like that in your world, Timothy, command those people for whom or to whom God has given financial resources, command them, what? Not to be arrogant. And it's an interesting first observation by Paul, but it's important here because Paul knows that money can corrupt us. He understands that resources can change the way our hearts work, and he realizes that those who are blessed can really easily get to a spot where they think they're better than the people around them, where they think they're smarter than the people around them. And you may be in here this morning, and you may be rich because you're smart. It works that way. But you are not smart because you're rich. It doesn't work that way. But it's easy sometimes for people who have resources and who have wealth and have accumulated any sort of that in this world to get to the point where they're arrogant, where they puff themselves up and they believe that they deserve more because they have something that others don't. And Paul says, number one, don't be arrogant. And then he continues in this next phrase that Paul says. The next part of this verse is the big idea. It is the heartbeat of what he's talking to Timothy about. And this right here, if you take nothing else this morning, if you listen to nothing else, if you hear nothing else, please get this. This is the big idea. Paul says, command them not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. Nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. And here's what Paul's saying. He's saying, when you have money, you don't see this coming. When God gifts you with some resources, you don't do it on purpose. You don't know that it's happening as it's happening. You don't notice it, but it sneaks in. As you gain wealth and possessions, your hope tends to migrate. As you gain wealth and possessions, your hope tends to migrate. The source of your hope for the present and the future shifts just a little bit. There's this verse that I love. I keep coming back to time and time again when I struggle with radical generosity in my own heart. And it's written by a really, really rich guy. Okay, it's written by one of the richest human beings that ever walked the face of the planet, and the Bible calls him the wisest human being that ever walked the face of the planet. So I think he's an authority on the subject of wealth. We can trust him here. It's in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 11. Solomon writes this: "The wealth of the rich is their fortified city. They imagine it a wall too high to scale." I think it's a really profound observation. Solomon says, yeah, wealthy people take comfort in their wealth. Wealthy people believe they're safe inside their wealth, but it's imaginary. It's fake. It's an illusion that happens inside of our minds. But as we get money and we get resources, we begin to shift our hope and our sense of security in the present and for the future away from the God of the universe and into our wealth, into our stuff. And we like to believe that we can have enough money. There's the opportunity, there's the ability in the world to save enough money to secure our future. And so we come up with this. We come up with this number inside of our heads that if I get there, if I can just get to this number, I will have saved myself secure, right? But here's the question I want to ask you. In my mind, that idea begs the question. If you give me 1 second, I'll try and answer it for you. Here's the question. How much money would you need to secure your future and the future of your family against every eventuality? How much would you need to save? Here's my guess at the answer. More than you got, right? It's a pretty simple answer. I don't even need to ask the NSA to hack into your bank accounts to know that one. Like, the answer is pretty simple. That's always the answer. More than you currently have is the answer. And we got to understand this. Because that's the answer, your soul is in grave danger if your hope has migrated even a little bit away from God and to your money. Your soul is in grave danger, because what happens is when you realize it, when your hope has migrated, even if you didn't mean for it to migrate, and then all of a sudden you realize that you don't have enough, and that to secure your future, to build that wall that's impenetrable in your mind, you need a little bit more. What happens is you start asking, what if? What if? What if? What if? What if? What if? And you start to cling tightly to what you have. This is the reason that rich people are less generous than poor people. Because poor people never put their hope in money. They don't have any. They don't have the option of putting their hope in money. It's just not available to them. And since they're not trying to save their way to safety, people who are poor, people who don't have a lot of resources, are able to come to God and come to the people around them with open hands. Because they know their hope does not lie in the stuff that's resting in those hands. But the danger for us, for every single one of us, is getting to the point where our hope has even unconsciously migrated to that point where we're not coming to people and we're not coming to God with open hands because we believe that maybe, just maybe, we can accumulate enough of that our hope is secure there. I don't know, those of us who've been to developing world countries can say like how humbling and how incredible it is to see the way in which poor people come to God and come to others with absolutely nothing. I remember the first time I sat in a slum in Reynosa and people who had nothing just gave and gave and gave. One thing I'll never forget is sitting in a building in the poorest square mile in the Western Hemisphere in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, just having person after person come up and offer me anything and everything that they had. Just come to me with open hands. Me, who was wearing one of the 5 pairs of shoes and 11 shirts that I brought to Haiti for a week. And when you see it, when you see how content they are, when you see the peace, when you see the life that exists in them because they're living out this generosity that is the shape of the God in whose image we're created, when you see it, it rattles you to the core for a little bit. And then you get back to the materialism of America and you remember you're poor because someone has more than you, and you forget about it, right? But the more we have, the more we tend to cling to what we've got. When wealth becomes your hope, you're just compelled to hoard. And it's a fascinating phenomenon. And to use Solomon's words, it's imagination. But it's an imagination that has captivated our culture. I just read an article on Friday about the charitable giving percentage of all the leading presidential candidates. And these are the people that are running to lead this thing, to lead the American dream. And if you look at the amount that they give, it's shockingly low. Multiple presidential candidates are giving less than 1% of their income away because they're caught up in the American dream. This is our society. This is the myth and the imagination that our society has bought into, hook, line, and sinker, that you can save enough to build a wall and you can be secure. Money is the thing. Wealth is the thing in which our nation has put its hope. And I know there's a lot of us in here this morning who don't see ourselves as rich. We don't. Maybe you never have, and maybe you're not even close to there, but as you hear me talking about this, you know deep down inside, you look at your heart and you know deep down inside, your hope has started to migrate. Your hope has started to shift, even a little bit. And you're not alone. Like, don't feel too bad. You're not alone. You are not the first person in the history of the world to have your hope shift away from God to money. 2,000 years ago, Paul wrote it to a bunch of people who are way poorer than any of us. He said, hey, check it out. Tell them, Timothy, tell them not to put their hope in the illusion that is wealth, but to put their hope in God, because God is the only thing worth hoping, and he's the only place where our hope is secure. And if our hope is found in God rather than money, we can be the kind of difference makers and world changers that we were created to be. We can live the kind of abundant life that God created us for and invites us into, because we're living in the shape of the God in whose image we're made, because God is a generous God. And check it out. I know. As soon as a pastor stands up and talks about money, people get grumpy. And it makes us nervous. And we wonder, like, why does the church always got to talk about money? And the answer is simple. Jesus did. Jesus did. He talked about it all the time. And I'm convinced of this. Like, it's not the most comfortable thing to talk about for any of us. It's not the most comfortable thing to talk about for me, but I'm convinced of this. If I shied away from this, if I never cast a vision for this church of the way we could live the generous lives God created us for, I wouldn't be a pastor worth listening to, a leader worth following, and Revision would not be a church worth attending, because Jesus talked about this stuff all the time. Jesus talked about money more than he talked about heaven and hell combined. And he did it for a really simple reason, okay? Jesus talked about money more than heaven and hell combined because he understands something about us that usually we're not self-aware of. And I say that as someone who's usually not self-aware of this, but Jesus understands something about us that we're not self-aware of, and this is the reason he talked about money all the time. And this is what it is that Jesus understands about us that sometimes we don't. The chief competitor with your heavenly Father in your life is your bank account. It's not Satan, okay? It's not. For most of us. I mean, maybe for some of us it's Satan. But the truth is, for most of us, we don't walk around every day like asking ourselves the question like, I just don't know who to choose. Should I go with Jesus or Satan? It's a really hard choice. Halloween or Christmas, I love them both. Like, this is not the spot that most of us are in on a daily basis. This isn't where we're at, right? Satan isn't the chief competitor with the Father for the throne in your life. But most of us on an everyday basis are caught up in this materialistic culture that says you can save enough, you can have enough, get more, hang tightly. And so, Jesus understands that it's our wealth, it's our affluence, it's our stuff that for most of us on an everyday of our life basis competes for our loyalty with the Heavenly Father, competes for that spot on the throne, that thing in which we put our hope, competes with our ability to live lives that are about God's kingdom and not our own kingdom, with our willingness to live lives that are shaped like the life of Jesus in the world every single day of our lives. That's what competes, and that's why Jesus talks about money so much. That's why we got to do it. We got to do it. Jesus lays it out pretty clearly. He says this, where your treasure is, that's where your heart's at. Where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be. And so the question we got to ask ourselves is, where's my treasure? Because Jesus kind of lays out, like, I mean, in my life, I want to come to the point where I can have a treasure in two places. Like, I got a little bit of my treasure in God, a little bit of my treasure in bank account, a little bit of my treasure in Chicago sports, and that only works when the Blackhawks are playing. But, like, I want treasure in multiple places, and Jesus tells us that's not how it works. It can't happen. Your treasure can't be found in your bank account and in your God, because here's what happens if you do. If you make the mistake of thinking you can have a little bit of both, what happens is eventually your wealth becomes a substitute for God. Your wealth becomes a substitute for God. Solomon, again, in his infinite wisdom, writes this in Proverbs chapter 30, verses 8 and 9. He says, give me neither poverty nor riches, but only my daily bread, what I need to live each day, day to day. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Solomon gets it. Ignoring God is what's at stake here. Letting wealth become God is what's at stake here, putting something else on the throne that the sovereign king of the universe deserves is what's at stake here. But it's easy to do. It's easy for me. I think it's easy for so many of us. We live in this culture that's so caught up in it. It's easy to get to this space where we have enough that we believe we've got it pretty much figured out on our own. We don't really need God anymore. And so we put our hope and our wealth instead of in God until we get to our deathbed. And then we realize our wealth cannot keep us alive and we can't take it with us. And all of a sudden our hope transfers back to God again. But I got to ask the question, what is the point? Why would you hope in the provision when you can hope in the provider? Why would we hope in the provision when we can hope in the provider? Why? The Bible tells us the source of every good thing is God. And he gives it for our enjoyment. He gives us for our sustenance, and he gives it for our enjoyment, which means remodeling your kitchen isn't a sin, and buying a lot of shoes isn't a sin, and getting new cars, that in and of itself isn't evil. God gives it so that we can provide for ourselves, and God gives it so that we can enjoy the world. But it's when you start to cling to it, when the stuff that you own begins to own you, when your heart begins to migrate, when your hope begins to migrate away from God and to your income, that your stuff starts to become problematic in a way that inhibits you, prevents you from living out your identity as a gifted person who's been blessed by God to be a blessing to the world around you and make a difference in people's lives. Okay, so we're all going to say this together this morning. We're all going to say this. I will not place my hope in riches, but in the one who richly provides. We're going to say it together. You might not even believe it. You might not believe it, but say it anyway just to be a part of this whole thing. It's not the first lie you've ever told, okay? So we're all going to say it together. We're all going to say it out loud. We're going to say it, and let's say it like we mean it, okay? Let's go. I will not place my hope in riches, but in the one who richly provides. We got to mean that, because if we don't mean it, if we don't begin to live it out, if we keep on hoping in wealth, we're going to become entitled and we're going to become ungrateful and we're going to cling so tightly to our stuff that just something ugly happens inside our souls and we're going to fail to live out the God image. We're going to fail to live out the opportunity that God is inviting us into to make a difference in the lives of the people around us and help heal up the brokenness of this world. Okay, so what do we do about it? I mean, some of us are in a spot right now where we realize, oh man, my hope is migrated. Oh man, I got him in that spot. I've been trying to build that wall. I've been chasing it for a really long time. Some of us are in that spot, and the question is, what do we do? What do we do about that? How do we find our way back? How do we fight our way back to putting God as our hope? How do we make sure that we don't unintentionally slip into that place where we're putting our hope in God? Like, what do we do? Those are great questions. I'm glad I asked them, okay? The answer is found by dropping right back into our main passage. Like 1 Timothy chapter 6, we read verse 18. This is what Paul says. He says, okay, Timothy, tell them not to put their hope in wealth. Tell them to do good. Not be good, but do good. And not just do any sort of normal good deeds, but be rich in good deeds. He says, tell them to be good, to do good and be rich in good deeds. And this is what Paul's trying to say. This is the idea that he's trying to have Timothy convey to the church. It says, we were created for generosity. It's part of how we're wired as human beings, and that's why it feels so good to be generous, because we're created for generosity, and God has given each and every one of us whatever he's given us, whether it's little or a lot. He's given us that so that we can give back in a way that shows the love of Jesus to the people around us and helps heal up the brokenness of their world. That's what it looks like to be rich in good deeds. And let's be clear, he's not talking about just doing a couple good things. He's talking about radical, countercultural, self-sacrificial giving. Paul's inviting us to give to the point where our hope can be in nothing else but God, because we don't have enough of anything else but God to cling to and to put our hope in. That's the kind of vision that Paul's painting here. That's the kind of life that God's inviting us into. And I know it's scary. I know we'd rather look at that number and feel really good about the way we're saving ourselves to safety. But at the end of the day, God's inviting us to something so much better and so much more and so much bigger than that. He's inviting us to live lives in the shape of Jesus that change the world. He's inviting us to put our hope in the one place that's worth hoping in. He's inviting us to give sacrificially. I think that's weird. That's countercultural, because we like to look at the dollar amount, right? We like to look at the number of zeros on the end of the dollar and feel really good about what we gave. But what Paul's telling us and what Jesus is telling us is that God doesn't care as much about the dollar amount as he cares about the level of the sacrifice. God doesn't care as much about your dollar amount as he cares about the level of the sacrifice that you made. And the question is, like, do you really believe for 1 second that any number can impress the creator of the universe? Like, whatever number it is, whatever number of zeros come at the end of what you've given in a year, do you believe that you can wow the God who holds the world in his hands? Do you believe that you can outgive the God who gave everything? The question is, how do we live it out? Well, the way it works, if Jesus is right, and you may be here and not believe that Jesus is right, and that's okay, but that's my default position. I figure he rose from the dead, I'm going with that guy. Okay, so if Jesus is right, this is the way that it works. God is concerned, impressed, moved by, interested in the percentage that you give and not the number that you give. God is interested in your willingness to come with open hands and sacrifice. God is asking, just how open are your hands when you come before me? There's a story about a time Jesus' disciples are hanging out at the temple and they're watching these people give. Because back in the day, like, they didn't take an offering during the service. Instead, they had these boxes sitting outside the building so that people could give as they left, so that everyone could watch how much people gave. So the really rich people made a big deal and a big show of how much they gave. And Jesus is chilling with the disciples and he watches this happen. And this is what it says in Mark chapter 12. It says, Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. Okay, now Jesus sees this giving and he makes a huge statement. Huge. Okay, this is huge. This is unbelievable, radical, countercultural stuff. Jesus looks at his disciples. He's sitting there with his disciples. He looks at the widow, and basically she drops in these 2 coins. And the word for these 2 coins that says worth a few cents, it's this word for this coin that was just a Hebrew coin. You couldn't even break change in the Greek world or in the Roman world for it. It's these coins that are worth 1/120th of a denarius, which is a day's wages. So basically, this lady drops in about 5 minutes worth of work. And Jesus watches this happen, and this is what he says to his disciples. Truly, I tell you, this poor widow has given more into the treasury than all the others. They gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all that she had to live on. And the disciples are looking, that guy gave $1,000. That guy wrote a $10,000 check. What do you mean she gave more? And Jesus is saying, the amount is never what it's about in the kingdom of heaven. The level of sacrifice, the level of willingness to come before me with open hands and be generous. The level of willingness to live life in the shape of a generous God who gave everything. That is what it's about in the kingdom of heaven. And the truth is this. Like, this is an absolute truth. The only way that you can make sure your hope never migrates is to come to God with hands completely open. That's the only way. It's the only way you can ensure that your hope will never migrate. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying for me. It's terrifying, I know. Because sometimes if you come to God with open hands, he's going to ask you to give an amount that you're comfortable with. And that's great. And sometimes if you come to God with open hands, he's going to ask you to give way more than you really wanted to give. And then what do you do? What do you do? It's terrifying, but that's the only way that we can ensure that our hope never migrates from our God to our wealth. It's the only way that we can live out our identity as blessed people, created and invited to bless the world moving forward. Okay, so here's my challenge to us this week. My challenge to every single one of us this week is to take 1 step forward toward generosity. Take 1 step forward toward generosity. Specifically, I want you to sit down with God and with your spouse if you're married. Sit down with God and with your spouse if you're married and pick a percentage that you're going to give in 2016. Just right off the top. Say, this is the percent. Like, come to God and say, okay, God. Okay. What do you want me to give? And I challenge you to actually do it, but come to God, sit down in front of him and ask, okay, God, what is it that you want me to give? And pick a percentage that you're going to give. Because the truth is, as Americans, you're living on a percentage of your income, but if you're like most people in America, you have no idea what that is. You just find out at the end, like you get your tax statement, you're like, oh, hey, that's how much I gave. And we like to do that, and then we see the number, and we're like really impressed with ourselves, like, oh, look at me, I'm a giver. Because we give out of our leftovers. We're spontaneous givers in the United States of America. The truth is, unless you pick a percentage, you're never going to get to this point. Unless you pick a percentage, you're always going to be beholden to wealth. You're always going to put your hope a little bit there, unless you can come pick a percentage and pre-decide that you're going to give it first. That the God of the universe who died to save you is better than your leftovers, and you're going to give it first. Because that's the way all of it works. Like, that's the way this works. Let's be honest. You wouldn't be here this morning, you wouldn't be looking at me on this stage if a bunch of people hadn't pre-decided to serve. Like imagine what would happen if every morning everyone at Revision woke up and decided whether they felt like serving. It'd be a real interesting morning sometimes. Like, well, I don't feel like going today. Some of you do that. I don't know. But like, there's some people here. You are blessed. We are blessed every Sunday because there's a group of people here at Revision who decided to live like they're rich and give their time and give their money and be generous. And they pre-decided that. That's why this church exists. That's why any church exists. And so my challenge is for us, every single one of us, to come to God with hands wide open and pray and seek and pick the percent that you're going to give in 2016 first. To the church and to whatever else God tugs at your heart for in this world. Whatever else it is. Because check it out. When you pick a percentage that you're going to give first, what happens is that your giving migrates along with your income rather than your hope migrating along with your income. So pick your percent. And trust that if God asks you to do it, God's going to provide. Because God is faithful and God's worth hoping in. And some of you who've been around church your whole lives are thinking, pick a percent? It's 10, right? 10. The church teaches tithing. Like, what do you mean pick your percent? Like, it's 10. Doesn't the church, like, tithing is in the Old Testament, right? God asked for 10% right off the bat. That's not what I want us to concern ourselves with this morning. I don't want us to stress out about it this morning because, like, for some of us who've never given before, for some of us whose hope really is in wealth, jumping from 0 to 10 is just not a doable thing. It's just not, okay? It's not, and if you read the New Testament, Jesus isn't as concerned with tithing and the number as it is in the Old Testament. Paul's not as concerned with it as in the Old Testament, and this will probably make you less happy rather than more, but they're not concerned with it because they watched a whole bunch of people stop at 10. And they're like, oh no, we can't give a number. People are stopping at 10. I got a way bigger vision for generosity than that, okay? So Jesus and Paul are inviting us to way more than 10, but like 10 is the Old Testament number, but that's not what it's about, okay? That's not the heart of it. What I want you to do is come to God with open hands because that's what God is concerned with and ask what it is he's calling you to give. Maybe, just ask. Maybe start with 6. 6% is the median household giving for households that make less than $50,000 in the United States of America. Households that make over $1 million drop under 2%. But for households that make under $50,000, 6% is the median. Maybe start there and get to 10 as quick as possible. 10's a great, and then get to 10 and get going. For some of us, that's easier than others because we just got indoctrinated in it. I was like the kid who had a birthday party and someone gave me a $10 bill. My mom drove me straight to the bank to make change so I could bring one to Sunday school. Like, I didn't have a choice, okay? It wasn't like an option in the Baptist family I grew up in. You just did it, okay? So it's easier when you've always done it to give 10 and give beyond to whatever else God's tugging at your heart for. But get there. Come to God with open hands because this is what's going to happen if you do. If you decide, okay, this is weird and this is scary, this is countercultural, and I don't know what's going to happen, but if you decide I'm not going to put my hope in wealth anymore, I'm going to come to God with open hands and just see what he does, he's going to radically change your heart and your vision for what you're about and what you can accomplish in this world. He's going to change your heart. He's going to change your heart. He's going to work through you to make a difference in the lives of the people around you and heal up the brokenness of this world. Now, I know some people come to me and ask, like, well, I got a lot of debt. Should I get out of debt before I stop giving? Unequivocally, no. Some people, some budget managers will tell you to do that. Bad idea, okay? Because here's what happens when you give. When you come to God with open hands and you start to give, God transforms your heart. And so it's a heart that's broken and transformed over the world, a life that starts being lived in the shape of Jesus. A changed heart will transform your debt way faster than any budget plan on this planet ever could. So come to God with open hands. Ask him what it is that he wants you to give. Because if you do it, when we do it, when this community decides that that's who we're going to be in this world, we're going to make a difference. The world's going to change. It's going to shift as individuals, our hope and our purpose and our identity. And the world's going to look at us and be amazed because radical generosity is not something that you see a lot. But the world's going to see us and say, oh my goodness, those people give like crazy. They're going to see the love of Jesus, and we're going to have the opportunity to heal up the brokenness around us, and the world will change when we live lives in the shape of Jesus Christ. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for taking our little itty-bitty amount of faith and using it to do extraordinary things in the world. Lord, we know it's hard. We need money to survive. We need shelter. We need food. We need this. And so it's hard to think about coming with hands completely open. But we just pray that we come this week with open hearts and open hands, and that you transform us into the generous people living the incredible, generous lives that you created us to live so that you can work through us to change the world. We pray it in Jesus' name.